Welcome, everybody, and a special welcome to our guest tonight, an old friend and colleague of mine, Tom Keegan, who is reporting in from Michigan City, Indiana. Tom, I'm going to ask you to catch us up on what you've been doing lately, but Tom, as you all know, was the sports editor for, I don't know how many years, Tom?
13 years.
13 years.
Yep.
At the Lawrence Journal-World, sports columnist. He was one of the panelists and stars of The Drive, which is a show on our beloved Channel 6, which is now gone to its rest in peace. And the Spodcast, I had to look back at your bio and I remembered the Spodcast. Were you podcasting before podcasting was cool?
Yes.
Yeah,
we were. We should have kept doing it. Maybe we'd be cool. But we were ahead of cool.
Who is we? Who is in that?
Andy Samuelson was doing it with me initially, and Jesse Newell.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Jesse Newell.
Matt Tate, Gary Bedore.
Yeah, I knew
Ryan
Gary,
Wood,
yeah.
I think, was initially there. So we had a lot of guys. Kevin Romery.
Yeah.
Very good at that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I came up with the name Spodcasters because it was a sports podcast. I don't, it's a little cheesy.
No, it makes sense, but way ahead of your time. Now podcasts are, all the rage. Well, Anyway, we're really glad you could join us and lend some expertise and hopefully opinions. Feel free. I am going to have to stay objective. I'm going to try my best about this movie.
Way.
I had strong feelings about this film, but I'm going to just try my best to be a
share
moderator.
Those feelings if they're strong or interesting.
Maybe I will later if there's time. But anyway, quite a film. Do you remember your reaction? I know you've watched it again for this, but do you remember sort of where you were and in what world? I guess you were at the Journal-World, right, when this movie came out? Or were you?
When I watched it, I was in Boston.
Oh, that's right, because this thing happened in 2013, the scandal, but the movie didn't come out until
18, I think,
18.
maybe 17.
Okay.
But when I watched it, it was 18 or 19, and it was wild. I had read a book that had a lot of this stuff in it, including the $100 cash payment in a diner. And the book was by Eddie Dominguez, who was one of the MLB investigators, who shares in the book that MLB didn't want them investigating after a while. It was like, whoa. And that's called Baseball Cop, The Dark Side of the American National Pastime. So I'd recommend that book too. But it was I thought it was really well done how they tied so many different things together. It was so much going on with these sleazy people. And, it's almost like the athletes involved get a break because you compare them to the other sleazy people in the film. And although A-Rod is as sleazy as anyone in the film, I mean, he's a different cat. He really is. He's so polished and smooth, and you interview him and he just uses your name and knows your name before you introduce yourself. But man, he's a different cat. It's almost like he had no personality and was such a can't miss prospect that the handlers got a hold of him at a very young age and said, you do understand you have to be perfect, right? Kind of like with Tiger Woods. And we all know that perfect is the enemy of good. And A-Rod is far, far from perfect, of course. One of the great comebacks in American sports history, though. Here he is now. They even consider him as an owner. He tried to buy the Mets, and if he had more money, they probably would have forgiven everything and let him do it. But here he is on their featured show on Sunday Night Baseball. And, there's no standards, really. There aren't for behavior when it comes to celebrities in general, and that includes athletes who are celebrities.
Yeah, and heck, even Kathleen had pointed out when we were discussing this that A-Rod was up on the platform because of J-Lo, but nevertheless up on the platform during the Biden inauguration. And just,
Right.
I mean, I guess they're not together anymore, but boy, it's not,
What a shock that is. George
smelling like
King,
a rose.
yeah, I worked with George King at the New York Post, and I told Steinbrenner, I said, George, I was talking to him on the phone, and I said, George, you ought to do a weekly column with George King. He goes, why is that? I said, because we could call it George King on King George. And George loved that. He loved being called King George. I don't think anyone had ever called him that before. But J-Lo, by the way, had no idea what a great voice she had until I watched the inauguration. Really, a beautiful
Wait,
thing.
you didn't have really? You had
Yeah, I had no
you just
idea.
thought she was a dancer, sort of mediocre singer, superstar person?
I thought she was just a celebrity, a fly girl in Living Color. That's how she got her start,
Uh-huh. Yeah, she
dancing
can
on.
sing. She can sing.
She really can, and she's
Yeah,
an actress too. So I guess I thought of her more as an actress than a singer, but she's got a beautiful voice.
she does. She does. Well, tell me about you said you knew the Miami New Times guy, the sports editor, who was really sort of, not only featured, but was kind of part of the story for a while.
Yeah, actually, I didn't know him. He did a great job. It's great that he just kept going after this story. I knew Pedro Gomez from
Oh,
ESPN was a good friend, who was in the movie at a couple different spots, including at the end. And Pedro was just a wonderful guy who you got the impression that every single day he enjoyed, that he just loved life. And he was at a Super Bowl party in Phoenix where he lived, and watching Tom Brady, add to his greatness, and drop dead of a heart attack, sadly. So I really miss Pedro, and it's good to see that he'll be remembered in this film too, because I think this film will have legs. I really do think that it's going to stay around forever because it's just so comical. It's amazing what a bunch of klutzes are involved in this. There's this multi-billion-dollar industry, and you've got the commissioner authorizing $100 cash payment in a diner. I wonder if they were going to report that to the IRS. Don't you have to report it when you give someone $100,000? I think you have to report
I
that.
wouldn't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, the comedy of errors almost, and just I heard an interview with the filmmaker, whose name is Billy Corbin, saying that it really wasn't a movie about doping or juicing in the MLB. It was this tinier story about this bad $4,000 loan, and how that itself, I mean, that's what the movie was really about. And
Well,
so
that was fascinating that this guy who sadly sorely needed friends, named Porter Fisher, the guy who took the steroids so that he could get bulked up. He said he wanted to look like Sly Stallone, which is funny in itself. And so then they said to him, well, would you like to become an investor? Sure. So he writes them a check for $4,000, said he wanted to be their chief of marketing, not realizing that what they're doing is completely illegal and you don't have a marketing manager. So they took his $4,000. He kept asking for it back when he figured out the whole thing was a sham, and they didn't give him the $4,000. And because of that, the whole lid was blown off of Major League Baseball and A-Rod and everything else, all over $4,000, which is hilarious when you think about it.
I'm curious to know, and Gary, I would love for you to weigh in on this too, if you want to. At what point did you, in the sports writing world, start understanding, whether it be sort of behind the scenes whispering, that this juicing was, I mean, this movie was made in 2013, but in my mind, there had to have been, something going on before that, or am I wrong?
No, there clearly wasn't. In the late 80s is when I first started hearing whispers, and and seeing evidence of guys bloating up. Lenny Dykstra, who was kind of a slight speed guy, and he comes to spring training one year just looking like Michelin Man, muscles on top of muscles. And actually, when I was at the New York Post, I did a story with a guy and nobody followed up on it. And 10 years later, the guy or someone else did a book on the whole thing, did a story about how in 1961, the year Roger Maris hit 61 homers, this guy, and he had some evidence, he said that Mickey Mantle told Roger Maris, said, "You got to get these shots I'm getting for my knees." He said, "My knees are fine." He says, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Not only do they make my knees feel better, but I'm way stronger and I've got great power now. And well, Mickey hit 54 that year. Roger Maris hit 61, and Roger Maris's hair started falling out. And everyone said, well, it's the stress because they're giving him a hard time about Babe Ruth. Well, what do you think is more likely going to cause hair to fall out? Excessive steroid use or stress over people giving you a hard time? I don't believe that stress over people giving you a hard time can cause hair loss. So it could be that in 1961 that this was going on, and I haven't read that book. I should look it up and find it. But then in the late 80s, I heard about it. And then, the 90s, it was really prevalent. And, and you'll hear people say, well, they weren't illegal until, and they'll throw some year out in the 21st century. Actually, they were illegal in 1991, but there was no testing. So they weren't enforcing that law in the book. So it was tantamount to it being legal.
And so then what do you do when that starts coming to the fore? What do you do as a reporter? And I'll read, maybe this is a good time to bring this in. I looked up, you just published, I can't remember where, you tell me where it was, if you would, your Baseball Hall of Fame selections for 2021.
Right. Northwest Indiana Times.
West Indiana Times. Okay.
Northwest. Yep.
Now, is this a list, and forgive me for not knowing, but is this a list that you release every year?
Yes, I vote every year, and you can either keep it private or release it. And I write about it every year. Okay. Write a column on, and then just my email box gets stuffed and with hate mail.
People disagreeing with your choices, perhaps?
Yeah. And now that I'm freelancing, that was a whole $75 I got for that.
God. We'll talk later.
Business is shot.
Prices, really, boy. Well, I want to read to people what you wrote this year. And maybe you write this every year, but this was so relevant. You said this ballot is an opinion document, not a legal one. So in order to vote my conscience, I always have made an educated guess, often based on the off-the-record conversations with non-cheaters about what signs to look for, what they were privy to, as to what extent a player's statistics were inflated by banned substances. I don't disallow cheaters. Instead, I guess whether they would have been Hall of Famers even without cheating. Also, even if a player not caught doing steroids was known by his peers to have been a cheater, I dilute his stats. Now, that is a lot easier said than done, I would think. I mean,
it's not an exact science, but if you just say, okay, guys who don't get caught, I'm going to trust their stats 100%, and I'm going to vote them in. And guys who do get caught, forget it, they're out. What you're then doing is recreating a Hall of Fame of guys who are not only great baseball players, but great cheaters. So if you're a great baseball player and a bad cheater, we won't let you in. But if you're a great baseball player and a great cheater, come on in. Well, to me, great cheaters are just as bad as bad cheaters, so it's not an exact science, but it's better than the alternative.
Okay, I may have to get opinionated. That's exactly what I didn't like about this movie. This idea that, I mean, that everyone's, and maybe it was a day, I don't remember the first day I saw it, but maybe my, moral indignation meter was on tilt. But I mean, it just blew my mind that we're basically talking about a world in which apparently everyone is cheating now,
The
regardless of,
majority are, and not just, and I'm glad you said now, not just during the so-called steroid era,
right,
because that's a falsity to call it that. It's a falsehood because we're in the steroid era. It may be testosterone. Is testosterone technically a steroid? I don't know, but they're still cheating. They're not cheating as effectively as when it was just all out. You could just do whatever you want and not worry about being detected. Now there are certain things that flow through your system in 12 hours. And so you're safe taking it after the ball game. And as long as you don't have a day game the next day, it'll flush right out of your system. So you take it after the ball game, and then the next day it's already out of your system, and it helps you perform better.
so you're saying that currently they really do have the same testing protocol as they did when all this was happening. You just have to, I mean, it's random testing, but right?
Yeah.
Or do you kind of know when your
It's
turn
random.
is?
I think you come to the ballpark and you find out it's that day you're being tested. I don't think they warn you, but yeah, that's all you have to do is make sure that you stay on that protocol. Make sure you are religious with it. And so cheating is here to stay. And I don't like this all or nothing baseball of a strikeout or a home run. To me, defense is the most exciting thing to watch. And to me, it's bastardized the game in a way that makes it a lot less appealing to me. It's almost like a home run derby. So what do you do then? If the cheaters are always ahead of the cops, what do you do? Well, there's really only one thing you can do, and that's make the ballparks a lot bigger so that you bring defense back into it, you bring speed back into it, make the game like it was back when I was a kid. Now that would be really costly. All these ballparks are built. You'd have to probably, I guess, I don't know what you do, get rid of the first couple rows and turn that into the field. I don't know. So it would be really, but there's no incentive to change it because I'm probably in the minority that I don't like a bunch of home runs. Home runs probably sell, and so we're stuck with it.
Gary, do you mind unmuting? I would love, you were nodding your head pretty intently there.
Oh, I just agree with Tom that the home run and strikeout thing is close to getting me not to watch baseball anymore. I'm a big White Sox fan, so I bought MLB.com again this year, but I was watching the Royals the other night and they were doing a little bit of small ball. They were bunting, and that was kind of refreshing, but I just think it's boring to wait for the home run. And if they're still using steroids, that's still, I know they've cheated forever, but that's appalling. I mean, we've got to try to get this cheating out of the game. We covered the Royals a lot when Brett played and Otis and those guys, and the ball players, they looked like normal people. I remember Brett was not this big muscular, monster, but he hit a lot of home runs. But I agree with Tom that I don't really enjoy the new waiting for the home run thing. Although some of the home runs they hit are amazing. They're bouncing off the scoreboard. And I will say when a White Sox player does it, I do like that. But I'd much prefer the baseball when we grew up. I mean, I watch highlights. Little leaguers are doing the bat flip, and if you watch some of the YouTube stuff, parents will post stuff for their kids. It's funny. They bat flip, and I wish we had aluminum bats when I was little because I've never hit a home run in my life.
Neither have I.
And these little 7-year-olds are bash. They get a hold of it. Bye bye home run. So
They're on steroids.
Well, that was,
But
that
that's
was-
why I was nodding. I agree with Tom about old style baseball. I kind of like a lot better.
well, and you do have to think about the kids. I mean, the kid, you get to a certain level and you find out about this and you find out this is the key, this is the trick. And steroids or testosterone are horrible for you. And I mean, they have long-term health consequences. They make you, violent, roid rage. They're just bad, and then they had these little kids. Now I know that was really funny, but I want everybody to weigh in on what you thought of the gimmick of using kids, adolescent kids, as these mafioso, cussing. And I really loved what they did. I thought the kids were great. I thought their costumes were really funny. But okay, thumbs up on the kids.
I love the kids, yeah.
Margie,
But Margie says, speaking of kids, it seemed a bit disconcerting to have kids in roles depicting people using drugs.
yeah. But the kid that played the baseball commissioner was awesome. He was-
Yeah, he
when
was
he-
good. I
when he
thought the
came out from
A-Rod
behind-
kid was too.
Yeah, he was awesome as well. I
Yeah.
loved it when the guy came out from behind the tree.
Yeah.
The commissioner kid.
And the
Yeah.
Pete Rose kid, like the kid doing the baseball card pose, that was just hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, we have a couple of questions already, so I want to make sure I get them all in comments. Kay says it seems ironic that $4,000 was what brought about, oh, where did it go? It's slipping down. Now we're having more. Here we go. That $4,000 was what brought about the exposure when they were dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, that was amazing.
Yeah, and billions of dollars in the baseball industry too. That has been, it was amazing. But this guy, Tony Bosch, the fake doctor, who said, people are equating a fake doctor with an unlicensed doctor. And I got to tell you, they're not the same. Yes, they are, Tony. Either you're a doctor or you're not. And you can't be a doctor if you're not licensed. It's a profession that requires a license. That was hilarious. So but what was he? Oh, so yeah, $4,000. Well, Tony Bosch he even said he was, I forget what the figure was, $5,000 a week for cocaine or whatever. So he's not thinking clearly, his brain is all messed up. All he cares about is getting his next toot of coke. And, so he figured $4,000, I'm not giving it to this guy. I need it for my cocaine habit.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Maureen wants to know, what do you think of Rob Manfred, who ran a pretty crappy investigation and yet ended up commissioner? Or am I reading his role wrong?
No, you're
And that was
not.
actually Jack's question.
Okay, it was from Jack. Maureen, you sure wanted to dump that one? No. Okay, it was Jack's question for the record.
And a great question, and it shows you how little they care about those things. I mean, they really all are about image. And to me, it was a crappy investigation. It was sleazy to pay $100,000 in cash. And to have to go on 60 Minutes and be humiliated and admit that, wow. Yeah, but the owners just want a commissioner that they can completely control and who will make a lot of money for them. And he's a very smart guy. So
I kind of think the same. I kind of think the same of A-Rod. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, where he ended up is because he got away with murder, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And nobody seems to care.
Yeah.
I mean, I know J-Lo has great powers, but healing that image was probably her greatest accomplishment in life.
I made another comment. When I grew up, I was a fan of Stan Musial. He was like a regular guy who was a great baseball player. And I got a chance to meet him and know him. And he was also just a nice guy. And that's how I think of baseball. And it isn't that way anymore.
Well, and with some cases it is.
Yeah, I shouldn't say, I'm generalizing.
Yeah.
That's unfair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
still some nice guys, but I think part of it is that money corrupts, and outrageous money corrupts absolutely or outrageously. You know, to bastardize someone's quote about power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But I think, you know, once people get money, they start thinking that kind of money, they start thinking they're geniuses, and I don't know. Stan Musial probably didn't make much more money than his neighbors back when he was a great player.
He made more money in his restaurant than he made playing baseball.
Jeez, was his restaurant even any good?
Yeah, it was very good. They used his name with a gentleman who is a really good chef and restaurant owner. So it was a steakhouse in St. Louis back in the day of steakhouses, and it was one of the best. And it lasted, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. It closed only. It lasted forever and ever and ever, and it was actually good. So, but I mean, you know, it was more his name being lent to it, and obviously some of his money, but he didn't make a lot of money. You know,
Mike Shannon had a good steakhouse in St. Louis, and then Deerdorf, the offensive lineman, and Hart, the quarterback, also had a great steakhouse.
Yeah, the difference was Deerdorf charged about 15 times more than Stan Musial, even with inflation.
Okay, we have
Sorry.
this is actually a good comment. Annie is saying this is back to the kids being used as reenactors for all this, you know, these bad deals. She thinks maybe that was the point, the effect of drugs trickling down to the children.
I think it was part of the point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not just to be cheeky and funny, but to make that point. I had not thought of that. That's good.
Oh, definitely. And the other part of the point too is just to show how childish everyone was. So
yeah, and that's what Kay just said too, that because these men were so emotionally immature.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. And Shelley said she thought the most culpable individuals were the parents taking their kids to Bosch.
Yes.
Sort of in that second wave. Yeah.
Yeah, and that didn't surprise me. I've seen parents like that who just want their kid to be famous. It's not even rich as much as it is famous. This sick obsession with fame is really taken such deep root, and it's sick. It's counterproductive to a happy life.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's say, so Scott Morgan wants to know if baseball is worth than other professional sports. And if so, why? And I'm assuming you mean juicing, Scott, specifically? Yeah.
I don't think it's worse than football, but football players have helmets on, and there are more of them on the field at once. So you tend to think of the team more than the individual, and you don't identify with the individual because the helmet hides his face. The baseball player's face is there forever. But also, the rules in baseball, believe it or not, are stricter than in football in this way. At one time, I don't know if this is still the case, but I had read reports that the NFL testing, in order to be flagged, you had to have 6 times the amount of testosterone in your body than the typical male that age. Well, these guys are big and they're strong and they're testosterone filled guys, or they wouldn't be so big and strong, but they're not naturally 6 times bigger and stronger than Jack and Gary and me. They're probably 4 times or 3 times stronger. So that's a pretty lenient standard, I think, that the NFL applies.
Okay. Jill wants to know, after the evidence came out about A-Rod's use of steroids, he was booed and hit with pitches. How many times did the pitchers hit him? I saw 2, but I wasn't sure whether the ball made contact in that scene. Do you remember?
I don't. I know. I thought that it was one that game, his first game back after all that stuff. I thought it was just one that hit him on basically the knee, but there was another brushback pitch, yeah. That
And did other
didn't hit him.
teams try that too? I mean, that was Boston, right?
I don't remember.
I think it was. I mean, did other opposing pitchers try that too after, right when he was just coming back?
And it's not just that he did steroids. A lot of guys did steroids, but he was making such a stink about it and everything. And you just take your medicine, not that kind of medicine, but you take your medicine when you get caught. And he didn't do it. So he kind of he brought more attention to it. He went against the code, the guy code of, you got caught, take your medicine, don't make it harder for the rest of us. And he did make it harder for the rest of them.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in or have a question that you would like to ask Tom or Gary?
I guess just a comment. I thought the movie had a lot of great characters in it. I love the professional tanner. He was a favorite. And then I thought the reporter, the guy from the Miami paper, was the hero of the whole thing.
Yes.
He was fantastic.
Terrific.
And,
I'd like to
yeah.
meet him.
Yeah, he works, I think, for the Washington Post now. But yeah, no, I thought he was tremendous. He was kind of, he was definitely the good guy. So,
Oh, definitely.
yeah,
He was awesome.
as all journalists are.
The professional
can't-
tanner, though, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh. I think that was the moment it lost me. Like, yeah, that was pretty early on where I love tanning. I love the products. I love, and it was Florida, all the things, like every single ingredient. And I did read one quick little blurb. It was a interview that film.com or film website did with the filmmaker Billy Corbin. And at the end, he makes this he gives this nod to our world today and politics and all that has happened. And he said, I think it's appropriate in 2018 with the state of the United States and the state of the world that we celebrate this anniversary of cheating to get ahead. And he laughs, cheating to get ahead. And that's just kept occurring to me over and over and over again watching the movie. It's just how
Cheating to get ahead.
cheating to get ahead, and how just it's everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it always has been. I don't know. But Bill, yes.
You can't help thinking about the 1919 Chicago Black Sox either. They didn't have stereos then, but they had gambling.
Right. And the interesting thing about that too is that Charlie Comiskey was such a skinflint with the players. They hated him for being so cheap that they, if he had been nicer to him, would they have not sunk to such depths?
What's the backstory there? Could you just synopsize it for those of us who don't know?
8 men were kicked out of baseball, eight White Sox, for throwing the 1919 World Series or throwing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So kind of like Pete Rose betting on his own games.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Right.
Okay.
Speaking of betting, here's another scandal that is just waiting to pop. Once they put pari-mutuel windows in ballparks, which it'll come to that, where you can walk up and bet on all sorts of things. I think you probably already can online during baseball games. Well, if they have those windows where you actually walk up, here's what I would do. I won't need to find a job because I will get rich going to ball games, finding out where the player's wife's sitting and following them up to the window and betting exactly as they're betting. Because they'll know if their husband is not quite right, or they may even, depending on how desperate they are a gambler, they may even put some barbiturates or something, or Quaaludes in their husband's coffee in the morning so that he's sluggish all day and has a bad game and costs his team. And they may be in cahoots with a couple of other wives on the team who, make sure they lose. Let's all put Quaaludes in our husband's coffee today.
This is quite the theory, Tom.
Well, you gotta think, who would have thought there'd be $100 grand in cash delivered by someone from MLB to some hoodlum?
Yeah, I know, but
You
I don't
gotta
know. I
think
see a novel.
outside the box, because it's that crazy now.
I see a novel in your future, maybe. That's a good storyline right there. Well, Kay says apparently Bosch has a new clinic. Could this possibly be true? A new clinic in Florida where he says he prescribes anti-aging drugs. Is that right, Kay?
Well, he tried to have one for kids, like to kids nutrition clinic. That didn't work. Wouldn't surprise me if he has an anti-aging clinic, but I mean, geez.
He's
certainly
got a
not like-
website.
He's
He
got
has
a
a
website?
website. Yeah, he has a website, talks about different programs they have. All you have to do is register and give them information, and they will give you your personal prescriptions that you need. So I don't know what all drugs he's tooting, but anyway. There's a website. I don't know if he's even active in it. He might just be getting money off of it and be off somewhere in one of his houses. Who knows?
Yeah, you know, a lot of people in this movie, it seemed, were not given a conscience, were not, or didn't develop a conscience throughout life. And
Right.
those type of people tend to repeat mistakes or just morph into a different type of mistake maker. So it's a pretty good thing to have, is a lack of conscience if you want to make dirty money.
I also think that, and I have this on pretty good authority, that whoever these contractors are that are testing these players, because there are companies that are contracted with by the NFL, by MLB, by the NCAA to test these players, may not always be on the up and up either. And because it just seems like sometimes, you know, maybe you'd hear about more cases because not everybody can fool everybody all of the time.
Everybody has a price, and maybe
Yeah.
maybe Major League Baseball knows which contractors to align themselves with,
Right. Yeah.
so that they don't come back with a lot of positive results.
Yeah.
You know, here's the thing to look for, because you asked me, Kathy, when did I first start hearing about steroids in baseball? It was in the late 80s, 87 maybe. And back then, once that was starting to get talked about, what becomes the big controversy that also is related to excessive home runs? So they said the ball was juiced in 87. And they said, there's no question the ball is juiced. It's made different, it's harder. And that's the reason for the home runs. Here we are with these testosterone stuff going on now, and the numbers have gone back up in the home runs. What resurfaced? Well, the baseball is juiced. Guess who loves it when there's talk about the baseball being juiced? The players love it because it takes the conversation away from performance enhancing drugs. And the owners and baseball management, the commissioner's office, loves it because it takes the conversation away from performance enhancing drugs. So anytime that juiced baseball issue comes up, just be suspicious.
So was that anything like that deflated football they accused Brady of? Was that a deal? Was that real, or
Yeah, that was real.
It was
yeah, but you know,
different thing.
He's doing pretty well now with
Fully inflated balls.
Yes, and in fact, that game at halftime is when they took that ball out of play and put in different balls, and he just went nuts in the second half and had a great second half.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. As this is from Scott. As a great sports writer, did you ever have any moral qualms about covering players you knew were cheating? And this, so this kind of goes back to what your criteria for the Hall of Fame list, and Okay, so you find out a player you know is cheating. Um, how do you rectify that? How do you resolve that in your mind?
Well, he said as a great sports writer, so I assume that question is being addressed to Gary Bedore.
Ooh,
We'll ask,
nice,
we
nice
will,
deflection.
we will ask both of you. I'm nothing
Uh,
if not a diplomat. We will ask both of you your opinion, but that really morally, how do you live with yourself, I guess, not to be too dramatic.
Well, you have no proof, so you can't come out and identify a specific player. You could say there are ways you can do it, and you go ahead and do it, but you can't come out and say Mike Piazza is on steroids. You can say Mike Piazza, who started hitting home runs at such and such an age and became bigger and stuff like that. And, and hopefully your relationships don't get damaged too badly. And it makes it hard, but you do what you have to do. And, you don't end up with being friends with people you cover anyway. In the end, it seems.
True. Yeah.
It's not a business you go into if you're going into it to make friends. You want to do that. I don't know what business you'd go into, but probably making desserts.
Library business.
Libraries,
That's what you
yeah.
do.
We
Library
all
business.
love libraries.
Well, and I should also say that Scott qualified that by saying he has his sports favorites, who I think it's implied are probably juicing, but so he's not judging. It's just, and I have my, I love Salvi. I'm sure he's doing something, but because he's huge. But yeah. So Gary, what's your take on that?
Well, when Sosa and McGuire were both breaking records that same season, they came, everywhere they went was a big media event before the game. And I don't know how many guys suspected or knew that were covering them, but I don't remember at the time there being a lot of talk about steroids about those guys. Maybe there were. Tom was covering it at that time, but I remember Sosa to this day, I don't think admits to anything. And
Yeah,
those
and he
two
clearly
guys, did he admit to it, Tom?
no, but here's a guy who, before he looked like the Michelin Man, wasn't
Yeah.
that special, and after he stopped looking like the Michelin Man, he wasn't good. So he was a hyper respondent to steroids, it seems to me. Hyper respondents are in other sports too, where, Gary, you may take steroids and it helps you run 30% faster because you're a hyper respondent, and it only helps me run 15% faster. So maybe Sosa was a hyper respondent. One of the things Bud Selig did point to, he said, why weren't people writing about this? And he said the Mitchell report only cites 3 different articles about steroids, or 5, he said, and 2 of those were mine. Someone told me I never did sit down and read the Mitchell report, but I was writing more aggressively about it and about everything else. I was at the New York Post. I figured, you have to be aggressive at the New York Post.
Yeah, I think if you knew that those guys were using, it would really be hard to cover baseball at the time because, you don't want to take part in that. And 2 guys that are using illegal drugs that are battling Roger Maris's record. And
I think people were hinting at it, though, writers, and that's why McGuire went nuts. It's because we're good. That's why we have more home runs. We're good.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Hank Aaron, Frank Robinson, Babe Ruth weren't good?
Yeah. And that's another great show. ESPN did a 30-by-30 on the Sosa McGuire era that year where they battled each other, and good stuff. But
yeah,
I would not like to be covering that if I knew they were using. I guess I would have to talk to the editors and see what's up, what they want to do.
Yeah, and you suspect it, but you can't come out right and say this. that this is bogus, you can say this may be tainted because, hint that they're doing it, but you can't, for reasons of libel, you can't just come right out and say they're juicing. But
Yeah.
you can write it in a way that I used to call it modern muscles.
I've got another question, but in the meantime, I want everybody to put your star rating in the chat, 1 to 5, 5 being the best. How many stars do you give this movie? And we'll compare notes. Meanwhile, Tom, Dave wants to know, is there a reason most of the emphasis is on offense as opposed to shortstops or pitchers?
Yes, because these nerds who run it have all their formulas that show that because the runs go up, so then the premium becomes on the power guys, and it's a defense doesn't save you as much because there aren't as many ground balls as there used to be. So you just load up on the power guys, and that's who gets the money, and that's who we have to watch play. And it's just like, it's like you're watching a bunch of shot putters carrying a lumber to the plate. It's just not as pretty a game in my mind.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, it looks like 4 stars is pretty much our median review, a couple higher, one lower. Does anyone want to open up their mic and give us your critique of the movie before we call it a night?
Yeah, I
You
think
have-
Bill had a question.
Where's Bill? Bill has jumped around. Oh, there you are.
We've been talking about professionals all night, but don't forget amateur Lance Armstrong. He competed for about 7 years with lots of drugs and swore up and down that he wasn't doing it. And then after about 9 years, he did admit that he had been doing it.
Oh, yeah. And this movie points out that the amateurs at the University of Miami and a number of the players there were customers of this guy, according to this guy Bosch. So yeah, amateurs, and that's where every time it trickles down a level, you get a little sadder, because then you have the high school kids with their parents going. How sad is that? My gosh.
So how does professional sport, or let's just talk baseball now, since that's the sport we're on, compare with NCAA baseball in terms of this particular problem,
I don't know.
prevalence wise?
I would say not as prevalent in college baseball, because just look at the body types,
Yeah,
and that these kids are, especially the guys who don't see themselves as prospects, they see themselves as playing a game they enjoy, and it's helping to pay for their education, and they're going to get the most out of it without destroying their bodies in the process, or in their minds too. I think steroids messes with the mind.
What's the percentage of college players who make it to the MLB? Do you know?
I don't know, but it'd be super, super low.
Yeah,
less than 1%.
yeah. Because I wonder about that too. Like, it's at some point, it's probably not worth it in their minds.
Right.
When that's going to
although
the
their
highest.
minds- You take, for example, a Kansas football team, and I forget which one it was, but someone was there talking to him and said, how many of you think you're going to play in the NFL? This is Kansas, which at the most, I'm sure they had 3 wins. How many of you guys think you're going to play in the NFL? And 85% of the kids raise their hands. So, more people think they're going to make it than do. And that's when it gets really sad.
Yeah. Anybody else? Would anybody else like to make a comment or ask a question to Tom or Gary? Anyone? Margie, are you coming in for a question? You're muted.
I was just going to say thanks, everyone, because even though it wasn't my favorite movie, I found the discussion very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Well, Tom, you added a lot to the discussion, as did you, Gary. We're so glad that you popped in. It's good to see your face again, even though it's on a video screen. This was one of those things that we were going to do. It was in our original plan for boot camp, is we were going to go to Liberty Hall and all watch a movie together and then go to dinner somewhere and have a discussion. But these have turned out so great for the most part. And it's because we can get people who are out of town, and like you, Tom, to come in and give us your perspective. So I thank you very much. And
You're welcome. I really enjoyed it.
it was great fun. And anybody been to a baseball game yet this year? Royals game? Anyone plan to go?
I want to.
Are you gonna go, Debbie? Okay, yeah. Are the Morgans going? You guys going to a
Oh,
game?
yeah,
Good.
we
Yeah.
usually go to some.
Yeah, I feel safe going now, but, okay,
Yeah.
well, happy spring,
Yeah.
everybody. Oh,
And
Kathleen, did you?
unmute. No, I was just gonna say, if you want to unmute, we can give Tom and Gary a round of applause.
Let's do
Thank
it,
you.
let's do it.
Thank
It was
you.
great. Yes.
Play ball, everybody. Play ball and enjoy your
Thank
dessert.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Great
Thanks a lot.
program.